the week of Valentine's Day, folks. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope that everybody has a wonderful time with their significant other, and somebody that we know has several significant others in comic books is the one and only Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of people have several varying opinions over who the best love interest for Spider-Man is. There are some people that think it's the Black Cat, Felicia Hardy. There are some people that think that it's Gwen Stacy. There are some people that think that it's Mary Jane Watson. We're going to debate this topic today. We have two very, very knowledgeable combatants to go at this clash of the Titans. We have the one and only John Automates with us today. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
And we also have our fellow nerd champ, Dan Johnson here. Dan, thank you so much. So our guest, John Automates, he is going to go ahead and give us our hot take for today that we're going to be arguing about, and then we're going to proceed with our debate. John, right. The floor is yours.
Listen, I understand that in recent years, the word toxic has become this huge thing. I get it. I totally understand. And I understand that Spider-Man and Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, might seem like a toxic relationship to many because so many people are used to MJ and a lot of people are used to Gwen Stacy, and they have been the ones who've been pushed heavily in movies and things along those lines. But I'm here to tell you, Felicia Hardy, Black Cat is by far, not even a little bit, by far the best relationship that Peter has had and can have. Listen, what is the one thing that Felicia Hardy has that MJ and Gwen Stacy don't? And I'm talking, yes, I do know that MJ eventually gets powers, but for the most part, that Black Cat aspect of her being the vigilante, her actually being able to go out there, her not being a damsel in distress. She doesn't need to be saved. There's nothing. She is more of an equal footing type of person to Peter Parker and Spider-Man than MJ or Gwen could ever be. Then you have the aspect of she actually likes his powers. I think that gets swept under the rug a lot. The fact that Felicia actually is excited for Spider-Man whenever he does something cool. And MJ, for more or less, kind of has liked it, but she's also kind of viewed it the same way Peter has in terms of like, oh, it's a curse. And it's like, well, Felicia's like, no, it's not a curse. It's a gift. It's absolutely great. And who wouldn't want a woman to be excited for them? Huh? I mean, come on. That's regular stuff. Then you have the fact of not only does she agree and feel that his powers are great, she actually pushes him to be more confident. And that's not talked about a lot too, because everybody knows that actual Peter Parker, not some of the variations, actual Peter Parker isn't a supremely confident guy unless he's pushed to be. Who pushes him to be that more than anybody else? It's Felicia. It's Black Cat. She absolutely pushes him. That adds into the fact that when she pushes him to be more confident, that chemistry grows. So they have better chemistry. You can't tell me they don't have better chemistry than MJ. It's almost like a high school thing. Felicia, Black Cat, that's an adult relationship. That's what that is. And then you have the fact, less emotional baggage while still operating in the gray. She's kind of more of a, like, Black Cat's definitely a gray character. Totally understand that. Sometimes she's good, sometimes she's bad. But one thing she's always helped Peter do is see the gray area where he usually doesn't. And so she kind of stops him from being a complete Boy Scout and more so gets him to look at things universally. I don't know how much better of a match you can get than those things when it comes to Black Cat. I'm just saying. That's my opening right there.
Wow. I mean, Dan, he gave you a lot to think about there, Dan.
Yeah.
He gave you a lot to think about. So John came in hot, man. He came in hot and prepared for this. He was definitely ready. We're going to give Dan 2 minutes to respond to our good friend, Mr. John Automates. And he is going to tell us who the best love interest for Spider-Man is in his eyes. And we'll go from there. Dan, the floor is yours.
All right. So I'm not even going to pretend to have even a little bit of an unbiased opinion about this. For most of 1990, I was 10 years old. And that is when I really got into comic books, buying comic books, reading comic books. And the title that got me from the convenience store rack to the comic book shop was Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man. It was the Wendigo storyline with Wolverine. It was the second storyline. And so my formative Spider-Man, the one that I grew up on, the one I cut my teeth on, is married to Mary Jane Watson Parker. She's not Mary Jane Watson. In my heart, she will always be Mary Jane Watson Parker. And those, even though I was 10, by the time, they screwed it all up and did One More Day, I was in my 20s. And the marriage struggles were a big part of who Spider-Man is to me. So that's where I touch a touchdown for it. And I do think that the Black Cat is a lot of fun. She is exciting, but she's not the one you bring home to mom. And one of the key things is that one of the differences between a Spider-Man and say like a Batman, my other favorite hero, is Batman is Bruce Wayne's true self. That's the truest version of that person. He is Batman. When he's Bruce Wayne, he's just pretending to be something he's totally not.
Fair.
He's pretending to be a playboy, a flippant kind of guy. The same thing, Superman, to a certain extent, when he was a young man or when he's home with mom and pa, Clark Kent is who he really is. But the bumbling nerd that's at the Daily Planet is not who Superman really is. Superman is really his truest self as Superman. When he's bumbling around as Clark, that's not him. Peter Parker is Peter Parker. When he puts on the mask, he's pretending to be his truest self is not Spider-Man. His truest self is the nerdy boy raised by May and Ben. That's who he is at his core. And Felicia is always more interested in the Spider. She calls him Spider. She wants him to leave the mask on most of the time. She's not super interested in Peter. She loves Spider-Man. She loves him a lot, but she's only willing to tolerate Peter to get to the Spider. That's who she really wants. And I think Mary Jane, she does view Spider-Man the same way Peter does. And I think crucial to Peter's character is that he really does hate being Spider-Man. He just despises it. He wants to quit about every 20 or 30 issues. So every 2 to 3 years, he throws his costume in the trash, swears he's never going to do it again, because honestly, he gets nothing but pain and suffering from it. And he's not Bugs Bunny. I've heard it explained before. He's Daffy Duck. Spider-Man is fun when he has trouble. And that he gets nothing but hate and bad press and pain and suffering and loss from being Spider-Man. And that makes him all the more heroic because he keeps doing it anyway. But if he lands the Black Cat and is able to keep her, then he gets the best thing in his life from being Spider-Man. And that kind of takes that point away of like being Spider-Man has never brought him anything but misery.
Man, you guys both flirt with that 2-minute thing for a minute. But anyway.
Nobody ever calls us on
it. So very interesting points made on both ends. What's really interesting about this debate is that I think that Mary Jane and Felicia both are they're both kind of a different version of the popular girl. That's the thing that I think is really interesting. You don't have the Gwen Stacy where somebody's going after the nerdy person that's almost more of a spirit animal for Peter. It's actually people fighting about which one of these popular girls that Peter is already too good for anyway should he be with. That's the thing that's really kind of funny about this. John, you heard what Dan had to say. We're going to go ahead and give you a minute to respond. So go ahead, take a minute, respond to what Dan just said.
I totally understand what Dan is saying, but I will think about this in a slightly different way because I actually have a retort to that. You see, Spider-Man at one point realizes that half the reason why he doesn't like being Spider-Man is because a lot of times he's not accepted as Spider-Man. And he finds that happen all the time, J. Jonah Jameson and things like that. But where does he really realize that? Well, he does team up with the X-Men quite a few times. And the thing that the X-Men are all about is the fact of them being accepted as mutants, something that Peter Parker and Spider-Man as both find comfort in, and actively is said throughout their team-ups that he actually finds comfort in the fact that they are trying to do that. He's friends with Wolverine for that very reason. He admires Charles Xavier for the fact that they're trying to normalize being upfront and out there and open with their powers. MJ doesn't make him feel that way, but Felicia does. And Felicia does have it where she's trying to make him feel normal about being Spider-Man and accepting the fact that he is Spider-Man. And he never gets that with MJ or Gwen Stacy for that matter, although Gwen does it a little bit better than MJ does. And I think, even though, yes, it is true that he has hated Spider-Man, one of the things that we can't forget is he never really gets a chance to really embrace it. And when he finally does embrace it, it's seen as bad. And, you know, the Venom and the symbiote and Black Suit Spider-Man, but he does feel better. That's all I'm saying.
So, Dan, we're going to give you a minute to respond to John, and then we'll go ahead and kind of have a little bit of a wrap up. Dan, you got a minute? Go ahead.
Okay. I will say that Felicia may make him feel good for a while. And that's why she is great for a 3 to 6 issue run, maybe even 12. But here's the thing about Spider-Man. You know it. It's written. It's like death and taxes. If Spider-Man is feeling good, he's about to get knocked down. And that's what we love about Spider-Man. If he gets to be and stay happy, he's just not Pete. That is not Peter Parker. It has to be the old Parker luck. And if he's getting love and acceptance for every aspect of himself on all sides, if he finds it within himself to stop hating being Spider-Man for more than 2 or 3 issues, then he's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man has got to make him late for work and lose his job and fail his classes and, you know, miss his rent and put a hole in the ceiling. That's what being Spider-Man, because rising above that is what makes him such a hero. His guilt-ridden conscience won't let him stop screwing up his life to be Spider-Man. So, like, no, he can't get rich, and no, he can't have the girl that accepts him as a superhero and talks him into thinking it's great, because he can never think it's great. He has to hate it. So, and I think and MJ is supportive in as much as she can be. She supports him in his hate. You know, he hates it, and she's willing to support that. She's willing to co-sign his misery. And sometimes that's all we really want. Just somebody to sit and be miserable with us, because misery loves company.
Oh man, that's quite the argument there, that Peter Parker is he's just in the pit of despair all the time, and who else can be in the pit of despair but somebody else that is miserable with their own life. So quite the argument there, Dan. But anyway, so you know, I come at this from somewhat of a biased perspective as well, because as a child of the 90s, I think we all admit that when we read Mary Jane Watson saying, "Tiger, you just hit the jackpot," that was one of those moments where it was just like you knew that was going to be a thing, that chemistry and the way that it clicked and all of that kind of stuff. However, the arguments that John is making for the Black Cat is something that I think we normally hear these kind of arguments when we're listening to the Mary Jane and Gwen debate. It's just like, yeah, but she's the bad girl, and yeah, but she pushes him, and yeah, she, you know, all this kind of stuff. So it's very interesting that now MJ is on kind of the other side of the debate. I think that's a very interesting thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a 3-minute free-for-all, 3 minutes to go ahead and call each other names, say you don't like each other's shirt, and that's why your argument is wrong, whatever you want to do. And then we'll go ahead and declare our arbitrary winner. So go ahead, guys, have at it.
Dan, you lost. I want you to know that you lost. You see,
Oh,
you lost for one specific thing. And it's not even your fault. That's the craziest thing about it. It's not even your fault. It's the writer's fault because the writers constantly make Peter unhappy. And the writers are the ones who give him the bad relationships and the bad problems. But you know what the writers did do? You know when he is his happiest? When he's with the black cat. Dan, it's
I'm telling
that's
you,
it.
he's at his happiest in those issues where he quits being Spider-Man for about half an issue and he convinces himself that the world doesn't need Spider-Man. And then he's just walking around, passing his classes, making it to work on time, getting to go out with Mary Jane. That's his
not
truly
him.
happiest moment.
But that's not him. And he has to turn into Spider-Man to be happy. And who allows him to be Spider-Man?
I mean, Dan, I understand where you're coming from, but are you actually saying he's the happiest when he gets to his most depressed moments? Is that what you're saying?
No,
when he gives up being Spider-Man because the world has beaten him so hard?
No, there are
that's when he's the happiest?
There are certain points where he convinces himself, no, you know what? Everything's going to be fine. I could take care of myself. There are runs that, where he'll spend a couple issues or half an issue thinking like, you know what, the world, or like he's lost his powers before and been like, and then been excited to not have those powers.
Yeah,
like, oh,
dude.
this is great.
Yeah.
I don't have great power, so I don't have that responsibility. And he's like skipping down the street like a kid out of school, or like when he thought Ben Reilly was the real him, he was totally like, oh yeah, there's a Spider-Man and I don't have to be him. I'm going home with Mary Jane. We're going to have babies and live in the suburbs. I'm going to Long Island. This is going to be great. And I think that would be his fondest dream, to wake up one morning and not be able to crawl on the wall. That would be his fondest thing. But and the black cat would be out. She would be out.
But because he can climb on the walls and because he does have the powers, the woman who literally celebrates him having those powers, look, and it's true, he doesn't really celebrate Spider-Man as his best moments, and yet he does his best things as Spider-Man. And Felicia, in a city that really doesn't give him his due, even though New York City loves Spider-Man, they don't really give him his due. And obviously, you got J. Jonah Jameson. I mean, my goodness, the way he goes at him all the time. It's nice to be able to fight some crime, deal with the haters, deal with the crazy media, and then come back to somebody who still accepts you throughout all of that as the person who had to deal with that in the first place as Spider-Man. Whereas Mary Jane is kind of like, oh, well, welcome back, Peter. But he didn't have to deal with that as Peter. He had to deal with that as Spider-Man. Felicia allows that to still be while still letting him kind of relax. I'm telling you.
But he gets home and earlier that day, she's robbed a bank.
Hey, listen, I'm not saying what she does is correct. I'm just saying sometimes you just can't handle what the independence is doing. But when they're together, he's just shown to be happy most of the time.
I don't know. MJ at home is the one of those driving factors that helps him rise above, and she is there to stitch him up. Like when he digs himself out of the grave after being buried alive by Craven, and he makes it home. Who's there to stitch him up? It's Mary Jane. Like, who is he trying?
Dad. But if we want to talk about some of the recent Spider-Man stories, we don't even have to talk about that. We could talk about the game, because what happens when the symbiote takes over her and her real feelings come out, and she starts talking about how she actually doesn't like everything that's happened and how she feels Spider-Man has gotten too much of the credit and how she thinks that she has to sit there and take care of him because Peter is inept and incompetent. I don't know. Doesn't sound like Felicia would be saying those things about him. I'm just
But now here's the thing. Anything that happens after one more day does not exist in my head canon. It's not Mephisto wiped away everyone's memories, and he wiped mine too. Mephisto was like, Spider-Man doesn't get published anymore. And I was like, you're right, Mephisto. There is no more Spider-Man. The story ended right here.
You guys could go on about this for way too long, but this is really funny. But
I think we're more passionate about it than you thought.
When I take a look at these two options, okay, when I take a look at Felicia, when I take a look at Mary Jane, I go back to what I grew up on as well, and they also were already married when I started reading, Dan, and I always thought to myself that they were going through more of a typical marriage than I think, than I think most people wanted to acknowledge at the time. It wasn't the happily ever after love story. There were intense marriage problems almost all the way throughout, and Harry was almost always involved, in making that a problem, and there were all kinds of other things as well. So it was always one of those things that was kind of in the background, that they weren't happy. But would he have been that way with anybody? I mean, I think that's probably the case. If he had married anybody else or ended up with anybody else, he probably would have been the one constant factor, because there's one. It's like the girl that that dates all the jerks, and you're just like, well, but you're the consistent variable here. Like, I think Peter's the consistent variable here. He might be the bad one this whole time.
Well, here's the thing, and I recently subscribed to Marvel Unlimited a year or two ago, and I'm making my way through Amazing Spider-Man. I'm in the mid 80s. I don't get a lot of time to read, but I've read up through the mid 80s. Peter is not just a nerd. He's kind of a jerk. He may be on the spectrum. Yeah. He's a little antisocial. You know what I'm saying? And I love him all the more for it, because I'm a nerdy kind of a jerk too. So
yeah. I mean, Reed's the same way. Right? I mean, Marvel's filled with different personalities. So for sure.
Yeah. So Pete he might be the problem, because he is kind of a jerk.
I think that's kind of the thing. So it's hard to say who would be the best fit for this guy that doesn't seem to work with anybody. You know what I mean? That's kind of the thing. But anyway, I do have to take into account the arguments that have been made, though, and you guys both did a great job. I think that's for sure. But I'm going to go back to this, because we got to declare a winner. Having listened to the arguments that were made today, okay. And setting aside my biases, I honestly do believe that I have not given the Black Cat enough credit. Okay. I honestly think that I have not. Even though I'm an MJ guy at heart, Dan, I'm going to go ahead and declare this week's Nerd Champ, Mr. John Automates. John, thank you so much. Very good. Very good. So we're going to go ahead and give John a 30-second victory lap, and then we'll just go ahead and wrap up. John, the floor is yours.
Look, I understand MJ and Peter Parker have had, for the most part, a pretty stable marriage. But if you go based off of the new world that we seem to live in, where everybody wants everybody to be unhappy, it seems like, well, MJ and Peter actually haven't been the greatest couple. In fact, in some cases, they've gotten divorced. We see that in some of the recent Spider-Man properties, Into the Spider-Verse being one of them. I get it. We haven't seen him truly go down a super, super, super long-term relationship path with Black Cat, but they always end up coming back to each other, whether it's a brief time or even for a little bit of time, and then they kind of are fleeting. But we never actually get a chance for them to actually be together. And I think one of those things that could actually work would be them being together, simply because they both get to be what they truly actually want to be, which is themselves. And I think themselves are Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And sometimes we just need people to accept us as who we are. That's all I'm saying.
And that's an excellent argument right there, Mr. John. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have not checked out John Automates, we've got the link to his channel in the description below. Go ahead and check that out. We also ask that if you like this video, come back, watch the rest of our videos. And we're going to have, we've had a few Valentine's debates. We're going to have some other things as well. So thank you so much for your time today, folks. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.